Well, it's fantastic to be with the founder and CEO of Stay Kind, a movement for kindness, with Ralph Kelly. Ralph, how are you going?
Hi Jane, it's really nice to see you on this cold night in Sydney, and I feel humbled to be interviewed by you.
That's very kind of you. Ralph, this is a difficult but uplifting conversation I think we're going to have. You started initially what was the Thomas Kelly Foundation after your eldest son Thomas was killed in a random attack in King's Cross. That was in 2012. 4 years later, your second son Stuart takes his own life. I think the first question I want to ask you, and people out there will be asking, is how do you find the resilience to do the work that you do each and every day?
Yeah, it is a good question. It's a difficult question as well. It's the unimaginable. You don't expect to be a parent and find yourself in a situation where you lose a child, whether it's to homicide or medical issues or car crashes. It's the worst kind of thing that can hit you, to be honest with you. And I wouldn't so much call it resilience. I think it's just a matter of getting up every day and learning to live with your lot, your trauma and your grief, which doesn't go away. And it's definitely not easy. It's definitely not easy. I think about the boys every single day of my life, throughout the day. Having lost both my parents quite a while ago, I often reflect on their lives, and they had great lives. They lived a life, but they both died early from illness. But I look at the boys, and they're 18, and you kind of wonder why. Why us? You see things on the news, terrible things on the news, but you never ever think it's going to happen to you. And I think no one can prepare you. There's no real book. You just seem to muddle along in your own way to just get up every day and just keep on going. And I think it's you have to be resilient, because otherwise you can just spiral down and down and down to the depths of depression, which is very easy to do in our situation, where you lose a child. But it's a matter of just trying to maintain that you have a life to lead, and that you have to live the fullest life you possibly can.
You have done so many interviews about what happened to both of the boys. So I thought in this interview, I would suggest that people look at YouTube and see some of the things you've already done. I didn't want to focus on the details of what happened to them. I wanted to focus more on your philosophy and you as a person and what motivates you to do the work that you do. And we've really got to start, I think, with your life. And you were mentioning your parents. Tell us, because you came from the UK, didn't you? You weren't born in Australia. Was it a happy household that you grew up in?
That's a good question, Jane. Well, I was born in London, and to quite wealthy parents, a bit of a gifted upbringing, I suppose. My father was in World War II in the Navy in England in the North Atlantic, and he had a passion for the sea. So, when I was not long after I was born, he bought a yacht and spent a lot of time just sailing around, and we'd spend every moment we could on the boat with him. And from that perspective, I think life was great. That my parents took me all over Europe and taught me other cultures and values of those other cultures. But I guess where my childhood crashed for me, if I can use that term, was it was kind of traditional to send your kids to boarding school. So whilst we lived in London, my parents checked me into boarding school when I was 7 years old.
7 years old.
And 7, yeah. So Dad was 4 when he went to boarding school. So
Really?
I guess he felt 7 was a good age. And it kind of, I don't know if I survived it particularly well. I didn't think I was a bad kid, but I used to be literally beaten by the school headmaster every 3 or 4 days. And within those beatings, there'd be sexual violence as well. It became so bad that I couldn't speak. I could only stutter. So I would, timidly go into the back of the classroom, find a seat in the back corner, would go under the radar as much as I possibly could so I wouldn't have to speak. And I was at that school for 5 years, but in the 5th year, there was a new headmaster. And obviously at the age of 7 till 12, your learning capabilities are really in full strife. So it's those early years where you start to learn. It's the foundation for everything. Well, I've since found out that my learning ability would have turned off in those years. And so my grades were pitiful to at best, all of them. I failed in everything. And so this new headmaster came into the school in my last year, and he wrote to my parents and he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's not a school in England that will accept your son into it. And my parents told me this, which was a bit of a bewildering thing when I look back on it, that, you know, your parents would tell you that there's not a school that would take you. And so I started to get counselling. You know, mum and dad wanted to work out what was going on in those days. I had spoken to my mother about the sexual and violent abuse that had been going on for the previous 4 years. She spoke to my dad. She came back and said, I've spoken to your father. He said he went through that and you just have to get on with it. But I think, you know, taking all that into account, I've got two older sisters. One's 3 years older than me and the other one's 4 years older than me. And they went to boarding school at the age of 14 or 15, I think. And the way that I dealt with being in an environment that was violent was to just shut down emotionally. I actually learned it really well. It was just the only way I would ever survive at boarding school was just shutting down everything. So when I got back to home, things seemed different. They didn't seem like, you know, when I was 7, you know, that 7-year-old age where I just adored being around my sisters and my parents. And I think, it was very difficult. I grew up saying that I was thick. To my sisters. My sisters were very intelligent, did very well at school. I obviously failed the whole way through. I came out to Sydney when I was 16 and had my last 2 years at school here. The only reason why the school took me is because one of my cousins went there and he was head of the school and head of, you know, football and cricket, blah, blah, blah. And so they took me thinking I'd be good, but obviously I wasn't. And it really wasn't until years and years later that I suddenly realized, someone said to me, you know what, you keep on saying you're thick. Why do you keep saying this?
No,
and I said, well, I basically was. And they said, well, because you went to boarding school, your mind just shut down, your learning ability shut down. It was because of what was the trauma you were going through at a young age.
So I think in a conversation that we've had, you told me that it wasn't until about 6 months ago that you looked into the idea that you might need some help. That is that's like a 50-year secret.
I wish I'd known earlier, to be honest with you, because the earlier you can get it corrected, the better. And I put my school days and what I went through into a cast iron box, and I threw away the key in that part of my brain, and never told anybody. I just kept it a complete secret. And then, you know, I'd watch on television people coming forward and saying that they've been sexually abused or violently abused when they're younger, whether they're males or females. And I used to go, how come it's taken them this long to come out with all of that? But I never reached down to the depths where that, you know, of my life. But then when someone said that to me, I started to reflect on it. I thought, oh my God, you know, that actually happened to me. And I look at, you know, the lack of love my parents actually, you know, didn't give me that love that I needed as a child, support, a place of safety to go to after being traumatized at school. That was never there because they never spoke about, refused to speak about those things. So I kind of think, I did about 6 months ago in November last year, 2020, I sought out help. So I went to Quest for Life in Bundamoon in New South Wales.
With
Patrick King. Yeah, Patrick King, who's amazing. And about halfway through the course, I went up to the course facilitator and I said, look, I just don't think this is for me. And the facilitator said, well, how come? And I said, because I feel like I'm a coconut. I've got this really hard exterior shell. I know there's the white mushy stuff inside and the coconut milk, but there's no way I can get through that shell. It's just completely, you know, how you get a coconut, you get an axe and try and open it, you throw it on the concrete and frustration. And she goes, but you're talking to me. So that's the first step of this.
Ralph, I have to ask you, how do you think your own trauma, your own childhood trauma, affected how you parented? Because you've got Madeline, you had Stuart, and you had Thomas.
Yeah.
How did that affect you as a parent?
Well, because of what I'd been through, and before we had Thomas as our firstborn, I knew that I was going to not parent the way my parents had parented me. Mm-hmm. I knew that I would spend every second of every day with them as much as I possibly could, you know, given work and their school commitments. But if I had to drive, up to Sydney. We were living in the Southern Highlands at the time. I had to drive to Sydney to see the boys playing sport, and then back to Barrel to watch Madeline play. I would be that kind of father. I always showed up to everything they did, and I got very much involved, and I loved every moment of being with them. Unquestionably, I mean, they were my life. That they are unconditional love. I just, at Christmas when all the families got together, I'd be with the kids, not with the adults, because I just enjoyed being so much with them.
You decided to start the foundation after Thomas's death, and you said that it was about searching for a reason to find out why had he been randomly attacked, why had you lost your eldest son in this way. It certainly wasn't the kind of life that you had as a young boy. I mean, why were people turning violent? Is that why the idea of harm prevention became really key when you first set up the Thomas Kelly Youth Foundation?
I think it was more about, firstly, when I started to meet a lot of people, I didn't just go into the foundation and think I was going to start a foundation. I wanted to find out why Thomas had been killed on the streets of Sydney in a global city where it's considered to be safe, or was considered to be safe, to walk around. At least when I was 18, you could more or less go anywhere, but the places you didn't want to go to that were bad, you wouldn't go to. And I couldn't understand what had happened, and since I'd grown up, and so I started to phone people and meet with people from all walks of life and industry to try to work out what had happened and to make the city so violent at night. And it stretched across, literally, I was talking to people, heads of industry, who were telling me about what had happened to them in the city, that they felt uncomfortable at night walking from one part of the city to the other. And you kind of shake your head going, what's happened? This is, why do we have so many thugs on the street, and people have lost respect for others? And I think, one of those meetings with a chap called David Gonski, he just begged me, please, Ralph, don't start a foundation, because it takes up so much of your time, and so many people do it, and most of the charities fail, and it wouldn't be a good thing to do. So later that afternoon, I met with one of the directors of Macquarie Bank, and he was talking about their fund managers having to leave work, throughout the night, because it's 24 hours, and how dangerous it was for them out on the streets, leaving the Macquarie Bank premises in Martin Place, and that they had to provide taxis, obviously, for all of them. And I just think I just felt, after meeting so many people, that I had to do something. I just had to try and do something. And I think starting a not-for-profit gives you something to focus on. I couldn't work. I couldn't go back to my job. I literally stopped working for about 2 years. I just couldn't do it. I just completely emotionally fell over.
You've said that an act of kindness could have saved Thomas's life. Do you still think that way? I mean, that involves another individual actually stopping what was obviously in his head before he aimed his punch at Thomas, or it involved other people stopping him from doing what he was going to do. Tell me a bit about that idea that you think he could have been prevented by kindness.
I think it could have been prevented by kindness. Absolutely. As parents, we have responsibilities, and we can't always leave it up to teachers in the classroom. It starts with us at home to sit the family around the table every night to have dinner and to talk about what happened during the day. But I think, as looking back, I think that, what parents should do is talk about kindness to their children every day and say, this is what I did kind today. So it could have been something like just letting the driver in front of you into your lane because they're trying to get across, rather than nudging up close, so that they can't get in. So it's just small acts, and then asking your children, what have you done kind today? So you start to instill those values of kindness at a very early age. So it's not something that needs to be taught or learned later in their life, which is almost too late. We've really got to start at those young informative age groups, and it has to come from us, the parents. And I think, we're seeing rises in domestic violence, and the way that we behave as adults in our homes will then normalise our children's behaviour. So if you know, our kids have little, things sticking off their head, taking in everything. And therefore it's really important that we watch what we say, how we say things, and that we're educating them all the time.
Ralph, the next turning point would have been Stuart's approaching adulthood. Now, you've said to me that you feel like you didn't listen to him when you needed to. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
It goes probably deeper than that. When we lost Thomas, I couldn't speak to Madeline or Stuart about his death. I just couldn't. I couldn't open up as a dad, and that was probably my responsibility and Kathy's. But I couldn't, because I knew if I did, I would just collapse into a ball of tears, and I didn't want to show them their dad doing that, because I didn't know what effect it would have on them as children. So that's kind of the first thing is, and so I left that mainly up to Kathy to just, to talk to them about. I just couldn't have those conversations, which in hindsight obviously wasn't the right path. I should have spoken to them how it was hurting me, and that we're all here to support each other. But I think with Stuart, Stuart and I were very, very close. And if you look at the past photographs, you'll always see him sitting next to me. And it was a bit like with my dad, we did everything together. So Stuart and I were always together. And he was an incredibly funny, intelligent, good-looking young boy. And, not about 4 weeks prior to him taking his life, he started talking to me about going away. And it was like, hey, Dad, can we go to that place in Victoria? Stu, I'm really busy at work. Do you mind if we can put it off and go some other time? 2, can we go back to Thailand? Stu, I'm still really busy at work. 2, Dad, can I go to London? Because of my British heritage, he could get an English passport as well.
So what was he trying to escape, do you think?
I think because he was 18, he was right in that age bracket, 18 to 25-year-olds, who were the most affected by the Sydney lockout laws. And as a family, we were receiving threats, and people were writing about our family. And Stuart had got up on stage one night at one of our functions and had made a presentation. And I think Stuart came under attack as well. Madeline flew largely under the radar. But Stuart didn't. He got up and he talked in front of 750 people, which how he did that at the age of 17, I have no idea, because I would have been stuttering. And I think, could I have listened more? Absolutely. If only he had just got me and shaken me and said, Dad, you really need to take me somewhere, because I'm not handling this very well. You can't see what's going in someone's mind, in their head. You don't know how they're feeling unless you have those conversations. And he didn't shake me. I just thought it was Stu just wanting to, shoot off and shoot the breeze and just go away somewhere with his dad. And for a long time, not a short time. And I didn't listen. I didn't listen. And I should have explored why he did ask me on 3 occasions, Melbourne, Thailand, London. It was obviously important to him. And obviously big regrets for me. They say you shouldn't feel like that. It's not your fault. But definitely, I think if we all listen to other people and listen and really listen and make them shake you, I think it will go a long, long way to saving lives. And know that people are loved. I think maybe Stuart felt he wasn't loved. That's another reason why I think people, turn to suicide, because they feel unloved. And definitely was, I would have done anything for him.
I was going to say that I think listening is just one of those, I think it's one of the hardest skills in the world, because we all think that we're pretty good at it. And there's just such a deep layer that often we don't get to, because it's just about slowing ourselves right down and then asking questions to make sure we understand what people are trying to tell us.
Absolutely.
I think it's really great that you've highlighted that, because it's a lost skill, I think, today.
Yeah, and I think if I can add on there, if there's something you want to tell someone, like with Stuart, there's a reason why I'm asking you this, and I didn't explore it. But if he'd actually said, Dad, this is serious, and I really want to talk to you about something, and he didn't have to tell me what had happened to him, or the bullying that had happened, but he just said, I need to get out of here for my life. I just, so I think as people on the other side, the person who needs to say something needs to actually really emphasize it and not hold it in as well.
Okay, I want to talk a bit about the work that you've been doing. I want you to describe, so when you started off what is now the Stay Kind movement, formerly the Thomas Kelly Youth Foundation, what did you think of as your mission at that time in 2013?
Our mission and our vision was really to make sure that all of our children got home safely. So we started to look at the streets of Sydney on a weekend and started to have meetings with the City of Sydney and the New South Wales State Government to see what we could do to make Sydney safer. And actually, all credit goes to the City of Sydney, to this lady called Monica Baroni, who's the CEO of the city. And she said, we have marshals that are out on the streets of Sydney helping people till about 9 p.m. at night. What we could do is turn those into volunteers who stay out all night, and the foundation could manage that. So we started to look at that. It was 18 months it took to get that up and running. And for something so simple, it took a long time because you had to have everybody on side. So I guess what I'm quite good at is building relationships and putting parties together and then doing something with that. People who believe that, we can make a difference. So we had to get police on board, ambulance, the city, obviously, Department of Health, and within New South Wales Government, Department of Health, Department of Justice, whole bunch of these different areas to all come forward and say, we want to do this too. And we did. And the city and the government gave us the funding, and we set up Town Hall back in 2014 and started from Town Hall, then moved to King's Cross and Darling Harbour.
So the Take Care volunteers would man a kind of area where people could recharge their phones, get water if they were perhaps a bit dehydrated, and maybe help to get home if they were having a bad night. That must be a feeling of great success that you helped so many young people over the years in what could have been, a good night that suddenly went really bad. Are you proud of that success?
Look, I'm more proud of the people who operationally run it and go out there every weekend. So they're out there from 9 p.m. till 4 a.m. on a Friday and a Saturday night, and it's they don't get a lot of thanks. It's a bit like paramedics don't get thanked and police don't get thanked, and we just kind of expect these things to happen. But our volunteers are quite often the first responders before ambulance arrive, if ambulances ever arrive, because they haven't been called. And they've seen a lot of critical incidences. So it's more than just recharging phones. Obviously, that's a large part of it, because if your phone's flat, young people feel very, lost from their friends and they want to get home. But it's the critical incidences that, we get there first. We stabilise the person, first aid. And that's the thing that they do, which I'm really proud that they have saved many, many lives. And we were closed during COVID, but we opened up about 7 or 8 weeks ago when the venues reopened. And what we're seeing in the first 2 months is a rise in self-harm.
What do you think that's due to?
I think, look, it could be multiple reasons. The breadwinner at home may have lost their job, and so they're obviously, home life is difficult. Maybe school, having to do Zoom meetings for school and not the social engagement. It could be multiple reasons. Suicide is a very very difficult area to look at as something as one, but that's kind of, and it's been younger people, as young, 15, 16-year-olds on the street self-harming. And I think that really is very, very sad. And, we're starting to see with the rise of the lockout laws that there's more fights in the city now, that's increasing. But still, what amazes me and what I'm so proud of is all these people who get together to make our city, Sydney, a safer place for everyone to enjoy. And we meet every quarter as a group. So we meet with the government and the police and the AMBOs and everyone who's involved. We come in every quarter and we sit down and we talk about what's happening, what trends are happening. And we just sit there with one reason, and that's to make sure that people get home safely.
Ralph, the Thomas Kelly Youth Foundation was rebranded, I think it was in 2019, to Stay Kind. What was the philosophy behind that rebranding?
There was a couple. I think people identified the foundation as being tied up with liquor, and any time there was violence on the street, the fact, Tom's name would be mentioned. That was very difficult for Madeline and Stuart. Madeline was at university doing a law degree, and she'd come home and said that, frequently that they were discussing the lockout laws in her university classes. And I think that was a very difficult time for her. And so we were tied up with that kind of liquor industry, but also I kind of think that calling a foundation after your child's name isn't the right thing to do in hindsight, because if your not-for-profit has legs and it can keep going, the last thing you want to do is when you do walk away from it is hand it over and have someone else running a foundation in your child's name. So I think it was time, when Stuart took his life in July 2016, that moment was a tipping moment for me, going, do I continue on, or I just stop and give up and go back in and not do anything anymore? But we have so many supporters for the safe spaces that I felt it was just too difficult. I didn't want to do it. I'd be letting so many people down. And so I asked our COO, Natalie, to look at what makes people bully, what makes people be unkind, what makes people be narcissists, and why do we have young people taking their lives? And so Natalie did some global desktop research, and every bit of research she looked at came up with, if you don't have kindness, then you don't see you can't see as a bully what it's like to other people when you bully them. And that goes all the way through, to narcissism in organizations, etc.
So the Thomas Kelly Youth Foundation was rebranded as the Stay Kind movement. Tell me about some of the projects that you're undertaking now, because it's expanded from having volunteers on the streets helping people. It just seems to have so many different elements to it now. Tell me about some of the projects that really excite you.
At the front of the foundation, we talk about staying kind, and we've called it Stay Kind because people, when they get up every morning, have to put them in that stay kind mood. So you're going to help someone. So to know you're going to help someone, you're going to observe people around you when you go out, or even in your own home. And where you see someone who looks like they need help, you're going to stop and you're going to lend a helping hand and go up to them and say, excuse me, I can see you're struggling, or would you like me to do something for you, that will help you with your day? And 10 times out of 10, people will say, thank you so much, and they'll take that help. And so that's why we've called it Stay Kind rather than Be Kind. Be Kind means that you will kind of be kind occasionally when you feel like it, but Stay Kind means that you're always going to be staying kind every day. And if we can change that value inside ourselves, it's quite interesting when you do it, because, I used to be one of those people in the car that would move up when someone wanted to come in my lane. And I remember Gordian Fulda from St Vincent's Hospital, who's director of St Vincent's, and we were having a morning tea once. And he's a funny chap, and he just said to me, oh, Ralph, I was coming in from Dover Heights to Darlinghurst, and it felt like my car was going backwards. And I'm saying, Gordian, how can your car go backwards? He said, I was letting so many people in. And it kind of struck me, well, here's one of the kindest people in Sydney you'll ever meet. And I've never forgotten that. And I now try to change everything that I do to make sure that I'm living and breathing, kindness, because whilst, I may get to work 5 minutes later or be late for a meeting, at least I know that I've done the right thing by people around me. And it's not only in the cars, it's everywhere. It can be in a conversation where maybe you're a bit irritated. And so instead of being irritated, what you can do is you can blow it out. My sister's partner goes, Ralph, you've got to blow it out. Blow it out, calm down. And it really works. So, with your partner, if you can see the conversation isn't going so well, you just go, I've just got to blow it out. And the other thing, of course, is meditation. Meditation helps untangle your brain. It's very good for your own well-being. And so, and staying in the present. So, when you're going for a walk, sometime during the day, instead of having your headphones in, or that you don't have headphones in, that you're actually listening and you're observing what's going on around you. All those little things which seem like the bleeding obvious can make a big difference to your life. And so now I think, since we've changed to Stay Kind, I'm trying very hard to practice all of those things to make not only my own life better, but other people's.
Yeah, since I've joined, I've also been trying to
Well done.
kindness a practice. But I guess the hardest thing is that it's in those moments of, I suppose, how should we describe it? When you least expect it, when it creeps, something bad creeps up on you and you can't kind of pull it back in. And I think it's in those moments, personally speaking, where, you know, the kindness needs to come in. But it takes a bit of self-restraint and self-reflection, though, doesn't it?
I think we have to do it for the next generation, to be honest. And when I say the next generation, you know, the children today, because if we're not doing it, but we expect them to do it, we've got to leave a world which is a better place. And I think it's so easy to get irritated.
Apart from blowing it out, which I really liked, and meditation, do you have advice for, you know, what you do in the heat of the moment when it's just, everything's just kind of like a huge wave around you? It's like you're being dumped at a beach. You know, what is your secret for how you suddenly pull out the stops and show kindness instead of the opposite?
I think it's really different for everybody, but I think you have to refrain and reflect.
Refrain and reflect. I like it.
And so rather than stopping yourself from becoming irritated at another person, so you're refraining from making a comment to them or doing something that possibly you'll regret later. And and I think respect comes into that as well. You know, some people don't know what they're saying when they do things, or they may be bad drivers, just bad drivers. That's just how they are, but that's not their fault. You know, we're not built the same. We're all different. As long as we understand that, then we may get through the world being a better person and leaving something rather than, getting old and being angry. I think we don't want to be angry when we're old, do we? When we know we haven't got too much longer to live, and then it's too late. You're better off to be a kind, gentle soul than an angry person and get to the end of your life and go, oh, I've made terrible mistakes all through my life.
Can a movement for kindness make people kinder?
Definitely. There's no question of a doubt. To change values, it takes between 10 and 15 years. Look at seatbelts or smoking campaigns, anti-smoking campaigns. But absolutely can work. I think kindness breeds kindness. It's the Mother Teresa with the pebble in the water, and it just ripples out, and that is what kindness can do. And we say in Stay Kind that if we all did an act of kindness every day, so there's 25 million Australians, we're not too far off 26 million. But if we all did an act of kindness every day, that's 9 billion acts of kindness a year. And it would make us all better. You know, we'd all be better for it. You know, our own wellness would increase. We wouldn't have depression. Mental health is not good at the moment because of all the things we've been through as Australians. And kindness can help that. It's a medicine for all of those all those medical problems. You know, it's the one thing that can actually fix all of us is kindness.
I was reading recently in Hugh McKay's book, The Kindness Revolution, that we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back for being kind. And I think it's a really interesting point, because sometimes I feel a bit gleeful if I've gone up to someone and say, can I help you? You know, it's almost like you're giving yourself a pat on the back. And I wonder, where do you stand with that? I mean, it's hard not to sort of feel virtuous, I guess.
I always feel better for doing it. Like even in petrol stations, I do it quite regularly now, because I've had a couple of things in petrol stations where older people really struggle, putting the petrol in the car. Or there was one older chap who turned out to be 95 trying to put air in his tires, and I could see him struggling terribly. And I said, can I help you? He said, oh, thank you so much. I didn't know how I was going to get back up. And I kind of thought, wow. And you kind of walk out of it. Yeah, you've got a big smile on your face. I'm normally driving out of the petrol station smiling, because I think, wow, what have you done? You know, that nobody else was offering to help.
I think that it's okay to feel a bit virtuous.
I think it is, because that means your wellness has increased. And it should be a bit like an aphrodisiac, that if you feel better for doing it, then the more you do it, the more you'll feel better. So it's not hard to do. These are easy things. We're not asking people to jump over bridges.
Ralph Kelly, this has been such a great chat. I actually think I want to do a second one with you, but I might give you a bit of a break. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful Stay Kind conversation.
Thanks so much. It's, as I said, humbling being interviewed by you, Jane. Thank you.